My slides were gone. My laptop smashed. I stepped barefoot on a shard while Alan sipped my coffee like nothing happened. Then came the second blow. He hadn't just ruined my shot. He'd recorded himself bragging about it, smirking, plotting to steal my life's work. That wasn't an accident. He planted it. And when the projector lit up with his confession, in front of every investor, I didn't flinch. Because what Alan never realized was I always build backups. And this time, one of them was justice. My name is Daniel Mercer, and I'm 45 years old. I live alone in my apartment, spending my days between engineering designs and the faint hum of soldering equipment. My younger brother Alan, who I put through college after our father's health crashed, drops by unannounced more lately. Each visit brings another dig about my midlife desperation lurking beneath his brotherly smile. My jaw tightens every time. The prototype on my desk represents years of work, and next week's conference could mean everything. But I've learned to be careful. Every file is backed up twice. Every design stored in triplicate. It's a habit that helps me sleep. The calendar above my workbench has next Thursday circled in red. For once, I need to put myself first. No more carrying others. No more sacrificing my dreams. But let me start from the beginning. I triple-checked the latches on my prototype case, running my fingers along each metal clasp. The familiar click, click, click settled my nerves like it always did. Slide 1, opening statement. Slide 2, market gap. Slide 3, technical specs. I muttered, pacing my kitchen while coffee reheated in the microwave. You know that feeling when something's too quiet? When the air gets heavy before a storm? That's what it felt like when Alan wandered in, wearing that grin that never quite reached his eyes. Big day, huh? He leaned against my counter, helping himself to my coffee, the same way he'd helped himself to my support all these years. Yeah, I kept my voice steady, professional. This conference slot could change everything. One presentation, 20 minutes. If they like what they see, I could launch my own company. Finally clear out those old debts. Most of them from covering his tuition, but I didn't mention that part. Alan swirled his coffee, that smirk still playing at the corners of his mouth. Quite the midlife Hail Mary you're throwing here, Danny. Hope it lands. My hands tightened on the prototype case. Could you just give me some quiet? I need to focus before I head out. He shrugged, taking another slow sip. Whatever you say, big brother. The microwave beeped, but I left my coffee there. I needed to grab my laptop bag from the living room and get moving. The sooner I got to the venue, the better. I stepped toward the living room, rehearsing my opening lines in my head. Then I heard it, that sharp, crystalline crunch under my shoe. The sound cut through me like a blade. Have you ever had one of those moments where time seems to stop? Where your brain refuses to process what your eyes are seeing? There I stood, frozen, staring down at the glittering shards scattered across my floor. The twisted hinge of my laptop jutted up like a broken rib from the wreckage. The machine I'd spent months programming. The slides I'd refined for weeks. The backup files My throat went dry as I lifted my eyes to find Alan lounging in the doorway, watching me. Just watching. No shock, no sympathy. Nothing but that same empty smile as he raised his coffee cup to his lips. Guess you'll have to start over, he said, and took a long, satisfied sip. My pulse hammered in my ears while the digital clock on my stove blinked closer to my presentation time. With trembling fingers, I knelt and lifted what remained of my laptop. The screen hung by a single wire, keys scattered like loose teeth across the hardwood. I turned to face my brother, my own flesh and blood, and asked the only question I could manage. Why? I didn't raise my voice, didn't need to. That single word carried the weight of every sacrifice I'd made, every check I'd written, every dream I'd put on hold to pull him through. And now here we were, with the shattered remains of my future scattered at my feet. Alan didn't answer, just kept sipping his coffee, my coffee, like he was savoring every drop of this moment. I forced myself to count breaths. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. An old trick Mark taught me back when I was starting out. My hands wanted to shake, wanted to curl into fists, but I couldn't afford anger right now. The digital clock on the stove chopped away another minute, each blink like a hammer strike against my temples. You ever notice how time speeds up exactly when you need it to slow down? I ran through my options, checking them off like items on a build sheet. The laptop was toast, literally and figuratively. The external drive I usually kept as backup was still in my office at work. But then I remembered my obsessive documentation habit, the one that had my colleagues rolling their eyes for years. Redundancy isn't paranoia, I'd always say. It's insurance. My fingers were steady now as I yanked open the desk drawer where I kept my emergency supplies. Behind the soldering tools and spare resistors, there it was. A plain black USB stick with my neat label. Prototype presentation, Vi.3.1, current. Come on, I muttered, fishing. You know those moments when everything moves in slow motion, but you're also racing against time. That's what it felt like, weaving through morning traffic. Every red light felt personal, every slow driver an obstacle placed there by the universe just to mess with me. Have you ever wanted to reach through your windshield and physically push the cars ahead of you? I kept glancing at the USB stick on my passenger seat, that little piece of plastic suddenly worth more than gold. The prototype case bounced against my leg with every lane change, a constant reminder of what was at stake. The familiar smell of solder and machine oil from my creation did nothing to calm my nerves. After what felt like hours but was probably 15 minutes, I screeched into the first parking spot I saw at the conference center. Pretty sure I left my car straddling 2 spaces. Sorry about that if you were there that day. My dress shoes weren't made for running, but I didn't care. I burst through the glass doors, nearly colliding with a banner announcing Engineering Innovation Summit 2023. The marble lobby stretched out like a marathon track. My lungs were burning by the time I spotted Mark's silver hair by the ballroom entrance. He was doing what he did best, working the room, telling those awful engineering jokes that somehow always landed. And then the quantum mechanic says, "Well, now I'm lost." Mark's laughter carried down the hall as the small group around him chuckled politely. His eyes caught mine, and without missing a beat, he smoothly wrapped up. "Speaking of brilliant minds, excuse me folks, 7 minutes, he muttered as I reached him, checking his watch. The program manager's getting twitchy. My shirt was sticking to my back as I rushed to the podium. A young stagehand materialized beside me, HDMI cable in hand. "No time for AV drama," she said, already plugging it into my USB port. "You're up." The room was packed. I could see the decision-makers in the front row, suits and stern faces, phones down, waiting. My fingers left damp prints on the lectern as I navigated to my presentation folder. The projector hummed to life, screen going black as it prepared to load. The progress bar appeared, moving with all the urgency of cold honey. I glanced at the wall clock, 11:08. Someone in the front row cleared their throat, that universal sound of impatience that makes your spine stiffen. Something was wrong. Instead of my carefully prepared title slide, a strange thumbnail appeared. My heart stuttered as I double-checked the file list. Had I selected the wrong file? No, the click hadn't registered. Before I could try again, the projector frame jumped, filling with an image I didn't recognize. Our kitchen floor. Those awful beige tiles Mom had picked out years ago. The audience shifted in their seats. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to force quit, when the speakers crackled to life. There was a soft exhale, then a laugh I'd know anywhere, thin and sharp, like a paper cut. Alan's voice filled the room, clear as a bell. He'll never see it coming. I felt my knees lock as Alan's voice echoed through the ballroom speakers. The screen showed our living room from an angle I'd never seen. The camera must have been hidden high on a bookshelf. Night shadows stretched across the carpet. And there was my desk, my prototype still wrapped in its protective cloth. Once I wreck his files, that deal is mine. Alan's recorded voice dripped with satisfaction. Poor Danny boy. Always so careful with his backups, but he never checks what's actually on them, does he? Too busy playing mentor to notice when someone's had enough of his superiority complex. You ever have one of those moments where your brain just refuses to process what's happening? Where reality feels like it's bending around you? A gasp rippled through the audience. Chairs scraped against the floor as people leaned forward, probably wondering if this was some bizarre opening gambit. I saw phones coming up, recording. The program manager, a woman in a charcoal suit, half rose from her seat, ready to cut the presentation short. My throat closed up. 20 years of engineering work, and here I was, starring in my brother's confession instead of presenting my designs. The headlines would write themselves. Family drama derails $1 million pitch. I could already feel the contract slipping away. That's when Mark stepped up to the lectern. His hand found my shoulder, steady as always, just like when he'd taught me to calibrate my first precision lathe. "Let it play," he whispered, his eyes meeting mine with the same certainty he'd shown when reviewing my first solo project 2 decades ago. I thought about all those nights I'd spent hunched over my workbench, the smell of metal shavings and coffee mixing in the air while I refined every detail of my design. About the checks I'd written for Alan's tuition, the bills I'd covered, the constant support I'd given without question. The taste of copper filled my mouth as I nodded, not trusting my voice. Stepping back from the lectern, I gripped its edges until my knuckles went white. The video continued playing, Alan's face now visible as he paced our living room, listing every perceived slight, every imagined insult. Always the golden boy, aren't you, Danny? Dad's perfect son, the responsible one. Well, guess what? I'm done living in your shadow. After tomorrow, they'll see who the real innovator is. Your design, my pitch. Who's going to know the difference once your files are gone? The audience had become a wall of mirrors. Dozens of faces reflecting shock, disgust, and something else. Understanding? I watched the minutes tick away on the wall clock, each second burning through the presentation slot I'd spent months preparing for. The video timeline bar crept forward, and suddenly Alan's image shifted to a new setting I didn't recognize. My stomach clenched as I realized there was more. Something beyond the sabotage I'd already witnessed. The program manager settled back into her seat, her expression unreadable as she folded her hands in her lap. You know what's worse than discovering a betrayal? Watching it unfold in front of a room full of strangers who hold your future in their hands. But sometimes the only way past poison is to let it all come out into the light. Mark's hand was still on my shoulder as the new footage began to play. I forced myself to stand straight, to face whatever came next, because the truth about betrayal, it grows best in darkness, feeds on secrets. And right now, in this overlit ballroom with its professional audience, Alan's shadowy plan was about to get a spotlight it never expected. I forced my breathing into the same rhythm I use when calibrating sensitive equipment. Slow, steady, deliberate. On screen, Alan had settled into my office chair, feet propped on my desk like he owned it. Getting his passwords was almost too easy, Alan's recorded voice continued, spinning lazily in my chair. Always uses the same pattern. Dad's birthday, then mom's, then some engineering term. Sentimental and predictable, that's our Danny. You know that feeling when you discover someone's been reading your diary? This was like that, but with 2 decades of professional work at stake instead of teenage secrets. The best part? Alan leaned toward whoever was holding the camera. He actually thinks I'm grateful for all that charity money over the years. He made air quotes, smirking. Tuition, rent, Dad's medical bills. Big brother just couldn't say no. Too busy playing savior to notice I was mapping out his entire workflow, learning every file structure. My hands stayed flat on the lectern, visible to everyone. Years of machine shop safety had taught me the value of clear, controlled movements when under pressure. Around me, the ballroom had gone quiet enough to hear the ventilation system humming overhead. The smell of coffee from someone's cup in the front row triggered a memory. Alan at my kitchen table, asking for help with grad school applications, telling me I was the only one he could trust. The bitter taste in my mouth now had nothing to do with caffeine. After the conference, on screen, Alan was counting on his fingers. First, I'll lock down the prototype specs. Then reach out to his industry contacts. They're all saved in his email, by the way. Finally, start my own firm using his groundwork. Who's going to believe the guy who lost his files over the brother who's been helping with the project all along? In the front row, executives who'd been ready to evaluate technical specs were now exchanging loaded glances. I caught fragments of whispered conversations, liability issues, and intellectual property. My chest tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. 20 years of engineering had taught me that panic never solved a problem. Here's the running total. Alan pulled out his phone, reading with exaggerated care. Grad school, $42,000. Rent coverage, $36,000 over 3 years. Dad's medical bills. He whistled low. Let's just say Big Brother always caves when you mention Dad's care. Never even asked for paperwork. Phones rose throughout the audience like digital fireflies, their red, recording lights steady and accusing. I didn't try to stop them. Sometimes the best documentation is the kind you never planned for. Mark hadn't moved from his spot stage left, his presence as solid as a steel I-beam. I caught his slight nod, the same one he'd given me years ago when I discovered a major flaw in a project the night before deadline. Stay cool. Let the evidence speak. The prototype case sat by my feet, containing months of refined engineering. Could raw technical merit still matter after this theatrical expose? I thought of my workshop rules. Process determines outcome. Trust your measurements. Integrity isn't optional. The video's audio suddenly peaked, making the speakers crackle. A new voice joined Alan's, someone just off camera. I recognized the casual drawl of Chris, Alan's friend from business school. You really think he won't suspect anything before the presentation? Chris asked. Danny? Alan's laugh had an edge I'd never heard before. He's too busy triple-checking his precious slides to notice what's right in front of him. Always was more comfortable with machines than people. The ballroom air felt heavier now, charged with something beyond professional judgment. These people hadn't come to witness a family implosion. They'd expected charts, specifications, return on investment projections. Instead, they were getting a masterclass in calculated betrayal. I glanced at the front row, where the program manager sat with her tablet untouched in her lap. Her expression reminded me of a metallurgy inspector I'd once worked with. Someone who cared less about surface polish and more about structural integrity. You ever have one of those moments where time seems to stretch like hot steel, where you can feel every microsecond dragging across your nerves? That's what it felt like watching Sandra Chen, the program manager, pace the center aisle in her crisp navy suit. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor. 4 steps left, pivot, 4 steps right. Each click felt like a hammer strike against my chances. The whispers started in the back rows and rippled forward like a wave. Chain of custody, product security protocols, board disclosure requirements. These weren't just conference attendees anymore. They were witnesses to something that went way beyond a technical presentation. My knuckles went white against the lectern's edges. The wood grain pressed into my palms, and I focused on that sensation instead of the churning in my gut. 43 seconds of my scheduled time slot remained. I'd spent enough nights running test sequences to know exactly how long a minute feels when everything's on the line. The smell of fresh coffee from someone's travel mug mixed with the artificial cool of the ballroom's air conditioning. It reminded me of countless late nights in my workshop, perfecting the prototype that now sat untouched in its case. Those nights had been about precision, about getting every detail right. Now I was standing in front of the exact audience I'd wanted, but not for any of the reasons I'd planned. 2 paths stretched out in front of me, clear as engineering schematics. Down one, I could try to salvage some dignity, apologize for the technical difficulties, and retreat. The other path? Let every second of Alan's confession play out under these fluorescent lights. Both options felt like failure, just different flavors of it. A hand rose from the front row. Thomas Weber, lead development executive. I'd studied his LinkedIn profile, prepared answers for his likely technical questions. Now he was asking something entirely different. Do you still want to present today? Blood rushed in my ears like I was standing next to a hydraulic press. The deck was compromised. That much was obvious from the file structure I'd glimpsed. Even if I could somehow stop this video and find my slides, we were almost out of time. These people had come to evaluate precision engineering, not witness a family's dirty laundry being aired. I met Weber's eyes, then swept my gaze across the front row. Sandra Chen had stopped pacing. Mark stood ready at stage left. Phones were still recording. I refused to let my expression beg for anything. Not sympathy, not extra time, not even basic professional courtesy. The truth needs to finish first, I said, keeping my voice steady. Then we can talk about the product. 20 years of precision machine work had taught me that you never skip steps, no matter how much pressure you're under. You came here to evaluate integrity in engineering. Let me show you what that really means. Sandra Chen's lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded. Her hand lifted, signaling to the AV tech in the back of the room. The video continued to play, its audio clear in the hushed ballroom. I squared my shoulders, feeling the weight of my career pressing down like a forge press. The next minute would either temper my professional reputation or shatter it completely. But I'd learned long ago in the workshop. You can't fix what you won't face head on. The prototype case sat by my feet, still locked and waiting. Above me, Alan's voice continued to detail his schemes through the speakers. Around me, executives and engineers sat in judgment. Not of my technical skills, but of something far more fundamental. You ever notice how time bends when you're watching your life unravel? The video kept rolling, and I kept standing there, letting each word of Alan's hit the room like hammer strikes on hot steel. Comptech's looking for fresh blood. Alan's voice echoed through the speakers. Their R&D director practically begged for a meeting after I dropped some hints about Danny's prototype specs. He waved a glossy brochure at the camera, and my stomach dropped. That familiar blue and silver logo, I'd seen it on half the lanyards in the front row. Something shifted in my chest right then. The panic and hurt crystallized into something colder, clearer. You know that moment when you're calibrating a precision instrument, and everything suddenly locks into perfect alignment? That's how it felt. All those years documenting every detail, backing up every file. It wasn't paranoia. It was preparation for exactly this moment. The air conditioning hummed overhead, mixing with the static crackle of the dying video file. 20 years of workshop discipline kept my hands steady as the projection flickered and went dark. The silence that followed felt thick enough to machine. "Thank you for your attention," I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. Maybe it was the engineer in me, treating this like any other system failure analysis. Sandra Chen stepped forward, her heels clicking against the hardwood. "We'll take 15 minutes to reset," she announced, gesturing to a nervous-looking speaker hovering by the door. "Mr. Harrison, please be ready to begin at 11:45. Mark appeared at my elbow as I unplugged the USB. His presence steadied me, just like it had when I was a fresh-faced intern learning how to handle pressure testing without flinching. "You did the brave thing," he said quietly, squeezing my shoulder. I nodded, not trusting my voice for anything more complex than that simple, "thank you," earlier. My hands moved on autopilot, packing away the prototype I never got to demonstrate. The case's locks clicked shut with familiar precision. At least some things still worked the way they were supposed to. The hallway outside was buzzing like an overloaded circuit. People huddled in small groups, phones pressed to ears, voices pitched low but urgent. I caught fragments as I passed. "Board needs to know. Security implications. Vendor verification protocols." My phone vibrated in my pocket. The number wasn't saved in my contacts, but the area code matched Comtech's corporate directory. I'd memorized it while researching potential partners, back when I thought this conference would go according to plan. The phone kept buzzing as I stood there, staring at those glowing digits. 20 years of engineering had taught me that the moment of truth usually comes disguised as a simple yes or no decision. Answer or ignore. Face it or run. You know what's funny? I'd spent months rehearsing how to handle tough questions about load tolerances and failure rates. Now I was standing in a hallway full of whispers, holding a phone that could either save my career or finish burning it down. The vibration buzzed against my palm like a warning sensor. One call, one chance to find out if I still had a future in this industry, or if Alan's betrayal had poisoned more than just our brotherhood. I let the call go to voicemail. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is just breathe for a minute. The bench outside the ballroom caught me as my legs finally gave in, the prototype case heavy across my knees. You ever notice how shame has actual physical weight? It presses down on your shoulders, crushes the air right out of your lungs. I could feel it settling in, thick as machine grease that won't wash off. "Mark," I said, my voice rougher than I wanted it to be. "I don't know if there's any coming back from this, even with the video proving I didn't do anything wrong." I gestured at the emptying hallway, where people were still huddled over their phones. "Who wants to partner with someone whose presentation turned into a public family meltdown?" Mark settled beside me, his presence steady as a calibrated gauge. "Do me a favor," he said. "Don't move until the room stops spinning. Let the truth move faster than panic." I almost laughed at that. The truth was already moving plenty fast. I could see it happening right in front of me. Every few seconds another phone would light up. Links were being shared, messages flying back and forth. The video was breaking containment, spreading beyond these walls like smoke through ventilation. Remember how I said earlier that trouble never knocks? Well, neither does viral content. It just seeps in under every door. My hands wouldn't stop trembling, so I clasped them together in my lap. 20 years of precision work, and suddenly I couldn't trust my own grip. But Mark was right about one thing. Rushing around in a panic wouldn't help anyone, especially not me. "Okay," I said, mostly to myself. "Okay, no rash moves. Let the stakeholders make the first call." I pulled out my tablet, forced my fingers steady enough to type. The email to Sandra Chen, the conference coordinator, was short and clinical, just the facts, laid out like a maintenance log. Timestamps, file verification, my explicit choice to let the video play instead of stopping it. Send. The sun was getting low by then, streaming through the lobby's glass wall at that late afternoon angle that turns everything golden. Funny how the world keeps turning even when your life hits a hard stop, isn't it? I packed up slow and deliberate, each motion measured like I was handling delicate equipment. The prototype case clicked shut one last time. Hadn't even gotten to open it today. The phone started buzzing again just as I pushed through the front doors into the parking lot. Different number this time, but the same area code. I let that one go to voicemail too. A minute later, the transcription popped up. I shouldn't have read it right then, standing there in the open. But engineers are curious by nature. We need to know how things break. Alan's voice converted to plain text. "He's been easy money since Dad got sick. All those guilt trips about family duty? Works every time. I've used him for money for years." The words hit like a dropped wrench on concrete. That sharp crack that makes everyone in the shop wince. You want to know the worst part? The thing that really twisted the knife? Every contact in my phone would be reading that line soon. Every colleague, every potential partner, everyone who ever worked with me would know exactly how thoroughly I'd been played. Mark's hand landed on my shoulder, steadying me like a support beam. Daniel. I looked up, realizing I'd been staring at that transcription for who knows how long. The sun had dropped lower, throwing long shadows across the parking lot. "You need a ride home?" he asked. Home, where my laptop still lay in pieces on the floor. Where coffee cups probably sat unwashed in the sink, because this morning felt like it happened in another lifetime. The phone buzzed again in my hand. Third number now. Another voicemail. Loading. I woke up with my neck kinked from sleeping in the armchair, still wearing yesterday's clothes. Mark had insisted on driving me home, probably worried I'd wrap my car around a pole with my head so twisted up. Smart man, Mark. Always was. The laptop pieces were still scattered across the floor where I'd left them. Didn't have the heart to clean up that particular crime scene just yet. You ever notice how morning light makes everything look worse? Like it strips away all those comfortable little lies we tell ourselves in the dark. My phone had that heavy feel of bad news waiting. The kind that makes you want to chuck it out that open window and pretend technology never existed. But 20+ years of engineering discipline doesn't let you hide from reality, no matter how much it stings. 3 emails from Mark sat in my inbox, all tagged FYI, like warning lights on a dashboard. I opened the first one, took a slow breath, and started reading. The corporate statement was short, just 2 paragraphs of carefully measured words. But that second paragraph, I had to read it twice to make sure I wasn't seeing things. After review of recently circulating material, Vertex Solutions has elected to discontinue exploratory discussions with all involved parties due to integrity concerns. I stared at that sentence until the words started swimming. Relief and grief hit me at the same time, tangling up in my chest like crossed wires. Alan's big play, his secret meetings, his whole scheme, all of it burned down in one PR-polished paragraph. My phone buzzed. 2 texts from family popped up back to back. Cousin Sarah. "Dan, please tell me that video isn't real." Uncle Jim. "What the hell is this? Call me now." I didn't have the energy for explanations or family drama. Instead, I just forwarded them Sandra Chen's conference note. Let the official record do the talking. Sometimes documentation is the best defense, right? The phone lit up again. Alan's name on the screen made my stomach clench. I hit silence and watched it roll to voicemail. A minute later, the transcription appeared. "Danny, you're ruining me. Please, you have to help fix this. You're my brother." My hands were steady enough to pour coffee now, at least. I carried it to the window and sat listening to the city wake up. Delivery trucks grinding gears, someone's car alarm going off in the distance, pigeons doing whatever pigeons do on fire escapes. None of them knew or cared about 2 brothers and their implosion. Kind of comforting, in a weird way. I scrolled back through Mark's emails, looking at that corporate statement again. The timestamp caught my eye this time, 9:47 p.m. yesterday. They hadn't waited for morning damage control or legal review. They'd cut ties the same night, while I was still sitting in Mark's car wondering if I had a career left. The coffee was cooling in my hands, but I finally felt like I could breathe again. Sure, my laptop was in pieces on the floor. Yeah, my own brother had tried to destroy everything I'd built. But that timestamp, that was something solid. That was proof that truth still had some weight in the world. I set the mug down and looked at my phone again. 3 missed calls now, all from numbers I didn't recognize. Somewhere in those area codes might be the answer to whether my contract still had a pulse, or if the industry would only see the mess and not the man who stayed standing through it. The coffee had gone cold. I got up to pour a fresh cup, stepping carefully around the laptop shards. They didn't look quite as sharp in the morning light. 2 days after the conference meltdown, I met Mark at Riverside Cafe. This little place tucked away from the business district, where the regulars are more interested in their crosswords than corporate drama. You know the type of spot. Worn leather booths that have seen 30 years of deals and breakups. Coffee strong enough to strip paint. "First thing," Mark said, sliding into our usual corner booth. "We document everything. And I mean everything, Daniel." His reading glasses caught the morning light as he pulled out his tablet. "Every backup, every timestamp, every email that shows you doing things by the book." I nodded, wrapping my hands around a mug that was more warmth than caffeine at this point. Already started a timeline. "You remember how Dad used to keep those meticulous maintenance logs for his shop equipment? The ones with the little red tabs for urgent items? Mark's eyebrows lifted with recognition. Yeah, guess some habits stick with you. I pulled out my own tablet and opened a folder I'd spent half the night organizing. Every file has its history tagged, every backup verified. Even got the original purchase records for that laptop, Alan. My voice caught for a second. Well, you know. Mark leaned in, scanning through the documentation with the same careful attention he'd given my first engineering proposals 20 years ago. Remember those? Back when I thought complex meant clever, and he had to teach me that elegance lives in simplicity? This is good, he said, making notes. Very good. Shows your process discipline didn't crack even when things went sideways. He tapped the screen. See these version control timestamps? They tell a story of consistency. That matters more than you might think. Right now, I took another sip of coffee, letting the familiar bitter taste ground me. You really think they'll look past the spectacle of it all? Daniel. Mark set down his tablet and gave me that steady look I'd seen 1,000 times. What happened at that conference was a stress test. Your system caught the sabotage, your backups held, and most importantly, you kept your integrity when the pressure hit maximum. My throat tightened. Funny how a simple word like integrity can carry so much weight. 2 hours later, I was sitting in my home office, staring at my webcam, while two familiar faces from the conference's front row looked back at me through the video call. Henderson from operations, Zhang from legal, both with the kind of careful neutral expressions that could mean anything. Walk us through your standard backup protocols, Mr. Mercer, Henderson said. I kept my voice steady, treating it like any other technical review. Triple redundancy minimum. Local backup, cloud storage, and physical media all encrypted. File versioning enabled across all channels. Access logs maintained for every interaction. Zhang's pen moved across his notepad. And these protocols were in place before the incident? Yes. 2 years of consistent implementation, documented in the summary I provided. I folded my hands on the desk to keep them still. The system performed exactly as designed under stress. Mark's voice came from his window in the corner of my screen, calm and authoritative. The incident demonstrated both process resilience and security compartmentalization. If anything, it validated the design philosophy. I watched their expressions shift slightly. The kind of subtle change you learn to read after enough contract negotiations. Henderson nodded. Slowly, Zhang set down his pen. An hour later, a document hit my inbox. Standard legal language about IP rights, confidentiality agreements, and chain of custody confirmations. My cursor hovered over each signature line as I read every word twice. Initial, sign, date, send. Then came the waiting. I sat with my arms crossed, trying to keep my hands from shaking, watching the minutes tick by on my monitor. 5, 10, 15. The email notification sound nearly made me jump. There it was. Subject line clean and clear as a runway. Contract. Countersigned. A laugh escaped me. Just one quiet huff of disbelief and relief. I sagged back in my chair, feeling the tension of the past few days finally start to unknot itself from my shoulders. I sent Mark a simple message. Thank you. The calendar app pinged, updating itself with new color-coded blocks stretching months into the future. Project, meetings, design reviews, production milestones, real work. Solid ground. You know what's funny about betrayal? How it makes you notice things you never saw before. Like how a workshop's roll-up door sounds different when it's yours alone. This deep, satisfied rumble that says welcome home in steel and springs. I stood there in the doorway of my new space, breathing in that beautiful mix of fresh paint and possibility. 1,200 square feet of concrete floor, clean 3-phase power, and not a single ghost of anyone else's expectations. Just me and my designs. Where do you want these benches, Mr. Mercer? The delivery guy's voice snapped me back to the present. Along that wall, I pointed to where I'd marked measurements in blue tape. And the racks can go opposite. While they worked, I checked my phone. Another group message from the family had popped up. Aunt Sarah this time. We love you, but we can't excuse Alan. I read it twice, feeling something twist in my chest that wasn't quite pain anymore. Just recognition, maybe, of how long I'd carried other people's excuses. I slipped the phone back in my pocket without typing a word. The installers finished up, and I found myself alone in my new kingdom of metal and possibility. Remember those early days in Dad's garage? How the smell of machine oil and sawdust meant everything was right with the world? This place had that same promise, but cleaner. Newer. Mine. I unpacked my prototype with the kind of care usually reserved for ancient artifacts or newborn babies. The familiar weight settled onto the bench, and I reached for my feeler gauges, those thin metal tongues that tell you if your tolerances are true. The routine of it steadied my hands, calmed my breathing. Check the clearances. Note the measurements. Let the numbers tell their honest story. Above me, the new projector mount waited empty, a stark reminder shaped like a lesson. Hadn't really planned on making that my first equipment purchase, but sometimes the universe hands you your priorities in ways you can't ignore. The white wall behind it would never just be a wall again. It was a screen that had shown truth in high definition. I pulled out my laptop, the new one, with extra backup drives, and drafted a quick email to the conference coordinator. Dear Ms. Chen, I wanted to express my appreciation for how your team handled the unexpected situation during my presentation slot. Your staff's professionalism and composure under pressure spoke volumes about your organization. Thank you for maintaining order in what could have been chaos. Best regards, Daniel Mercer. Short. Professional. No mention of brothers or betrayal or how sometimes the worst moments show us who we really are. The afternoon light slanted through the high windows, painting long rectangles on the floor. Time for the unofficial ribbon cutting. Just me, a key, and a door that needed opening because work wasn't going to do itself. No champagne, no speeches, no crowd. Just the quiet click of a lock and the satisfaction of knowing every square inch of this place was earned. I took out my phone one last time and snapped a photo of that blank white wall. Funny how something so simple could feel like such a statement. Here's where truth will live, whether we plan for it or not. The evening air was starting to cool as I did my final walkthrough. Had to smile at the D. Mercer Engineering sign by the door. Amazing how different your own name looks when it's not living in anyone else's shadow. You ever notice how the first morning in a new place feels different? Like the air itself knows something's changed. That's how it felt unlocking my workshop door at sunrise, watching that golden light creep across the concrete floor. I'd picked up one of those cheap party store ribbons. Red satin, nothing fancy. Stretched it across the roll-up door and let it flutter in the morning breeze. You know what's funny? I couldn't remember the last time I'd celebrated anything that was just mine. Really mine. The utility knife felt solid in my hand as I made that single clean cut. No speeches, no applause. Just the soft whisper of blade through fabric and the satisfying thunk of the door rolling up into its track. Inside, I hit the lights, and the fluorescents hummed to life one by one, like a slow electronic welcome. Morning, I muttered to no one in particular. And wasn't that a beautiful thing? No one to answer? No one to please but myself. The projector mount had been nagging at me since yesterday. One last bolt needed tightening. I grabbed my socket wrench and climbed the ladder, feeling that comfortable resistance as metal caught metal. Perfect. Some people might think it's strange making a projector my first real equipment purchase. But sometimes the most important tools aren't the ones that build things. They're the ones that show things for what they really are. My phone buzzed while I was testing the focus. Another email from Alan's target company. You know, the one he'd tried to court while planning to wreck my presentation. Their legal department had sent over their final notice. This confirms permanent removal of Alan Mercer from all approved vendor listings. Below that was a link to their public statement, now archived online where it would live forever in corporate memory. I filed the email away. Same folder as all the others. Professional, organized, clean, just like the workshop around me. The fresh benches still gleaming under the lights. The empty racks waiting to be filled with honest work. And that calendar on the wall. My calendar, with my deadlines, my projects. No one else's name anywhere in sight. Another voicemail notification popped up. Alan again. Third one this week. Each one a little more desperate than the last, I bet. But you know what? I didn't need to hear it. Some voices just get quieter when you stop amplifying them. Standing there in my new space, I thought about what he'd lost. Not just the business connections, though those were gone for good, but the family trust too. The casual Sunday dinners, the holiday gatherings, all those little moments where people used to make excuses for him. That's the thing about public disgrace. It doesn't just close professional doors. It changes how people see your whole story. I walked over to the projector's control panel and hit the power button. The lamp warmed up with that familiar whine, and suddenly that clean white wall was filled with light. Bright. Uncompromising. Kind of beautiful, really. You know what it reminded me of? Those old lighthouse beacons that keep ships from crashing on the rocks. Because that's what truth is, isn't it? A light that shows you where the dangerous parts are, if you're willing to look. I stood there in that glow, feeling the quiet of the space settle around me. No anger left, no need for triumph. Just clarity. like when you finally get the tolerances right on a complicated piece of machinery. The words came out soft, more observation than judgment. Betrayal always projects back onto the betrayer. That white light kept shining, steady and sure, turning the whole workshop into something like a clean page ready for new designs, new stories, better ones.